As far as load patterns here, I'm just going to do a constant user count of 2. I'll bring my machines to its knees if I do any kind of realistic load test. Here's where we hit the load target. You can load pattern. You can either do a constant load, so 200, 2,000 users, or, and I do this very often, a step load. So I want to start with, I know my machine can handle 100 users. I want it every minute to add another 25 users, and I want to find where it breaks. And I know I'll never get to 10,000, for example. So it's really easy just to set up something that says, okay, hey, start me off with 100, add 25 users every minute, and I'm just going to watch this thing and find out where it breaks. Then I know my capacity. So this is one of the most common types of load tests I do, common patterns I use on the load test. For now, we're just going to do a constant load. As far as test mix models, I'm going to skip this. I'm going to let you excuse me, read those descriptions, and they should make sense to you. Test mix. Okay, which test do I want to include within here? Well, I'm only going to include the web performance tests. I can add unit tests. I recommend against it. I can add coded UI tests, whatever I want, okay? So really, here's what I've said. I said my most common pattern, I have people executing the editing of employee details, and I have people creating new tickets. Well, if I'm a crummy cable company, you know I got a whole lot more people creating tickets than I do editing employee information, but maybe you got a lot of employee turnover or whatever. So maybe you're executing those frequently. So what I've done here is I've said, okay, 85% of the tests you execute during the load test should be creating new tickets, and only 15% should be editing zones. And typically you might have 5, 6, 7 key scenarios in here. Key different tests in here that make up your scenario. So that's kind of handy. Network. What kind of network do my customers use? Are they on 3G? Do I want to simulate a LAN? Do I want some portion? Do I want to say 50% are on a LAN and 50% are on 3G? Whatever. So this is going to simulate different networks. Same with browsers. What are my folks using? IE, Chrome, Firefox. Simulate those browsers. So that's going to be sent in the HTTP request header. Okay? I could spend a ton of time on this. I'm just going to add my machine here because I'm both the web browser and I'm the client, but you're going to want to be monitoring your SQL Server database. You'll want to monitor your web servers or all the servers in your farm if you're using a farm. This is where you go in and add those. And then there's some canned counter sets. So if this was the SQL Server, boom, I've just, with a click of the button, I've said, go grab me the most common SQL Server counters I'm going to be concerned about. Or if I'm running IIS or a .NET app or an ASP.NET app, just go grab those common counter sets. I think I'll just leave it as those two. Okay, and then I'm going to hit next. And then finally, how long do I want this thing to run? I'm only going to run it for a minute. We don't have much time here. Okay, but I can also do by test iterations. Run until you execute 1,000 tests or whatever it is. And then sampling rate. How often do I want to go out and grab those counters from the machine? Gloss over everything else. Click Finish. And I didn't launch as an admin, so I think I'm not going to get some counters. That's fine. So we go ahead and let's execute my load test. This is really tough on a smaller screen. What's going to come up though is all those counters and some key metrics that are gathered during load test are going to start showing up in the graphs up here. And I've got an error probably that it couldn't gather counters because I'm not running as admin. No, let's do this. I'm going to try one thing, one change here, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, I'll move on. In the interest of time, I'm just going to go ahead and move on past this. Maybe I've got a load test result open or something. Okay, in any case, as you're running the load test, it's going to be showing various different graphs and counters and that sort of thing. Graphics here will be populating throughout the test run, so you can monitor. Let's see if I have any threshold. Yep, threshold violations will look like. Let's see if I can find one. I can't find it on the graph, unfortunately, but well, this is strange. So it's throwing me an error, but I'm actually executing the test right now. Okay. All right, so for some reason, this is a 10-minute test. So anyways, as I'm running along here, I can change which items I want to monitor. So the system under test is monitoring right now my server process, memory, how many bytes per second, that sort of thing. If I stop my test, it's going to come up with a nice summary report. Where I can drill in and I can see, okay, here's my slowest pages up here. I can look down here and see what my average page times were. So it gives me some nice reports, nice graphics. I can create Excel reports, export these things to some canned Excel reports. So really some pretty nice capabilities here that just really don't demo well unless you've got a bigger screen. As far as new feature functionality, what's new with these web performance tests? I think there's a number of bug fixes, but I think the only new feature that I recall seeing is that there's now a 64-bit 64-bit controller for better scaling. So if you're having problems with long test runs or hitting the larger virtual user counts, the 64-bit test controller should help. All right, let's leave the load test world and get into the last couple of things here. Okay, so order testing. What is order testing? You use them when the order of your tests are important, and I don't recommend using them often, almost never if you can. You want to write your test in such a way that regardless of what order the test runner chooses to run them, they're going to pass. In the real world, I realize sometimes it's just too much of a burden to do that. When that's the case, use your order test. Generic testing, too, that's just a legacy thing. That's a way of launching an executable, reading a response code, and giving you the ability to capture those results in Visual Studio or automate it and publish them to TFS. The idea there is if you've got some old executable test harness that you want to include with your automated builds, the generic test is what you do. Okay, and this is just a command line thing. Unit testing. Okay, this is white box testing. This is where you need to have intimate knowledge of what's going on within the code you're testing. Unit testing is also good for WCF testing. WCF testing, unless you're doing the basic HTTP binding, you're going to need that client proxy. I'm forgetting the word, but I'll move on. So using unit test for this rather than web performance test is going to be a lot better for the WCF testing. It's also good for API testing, which maybe is more of a gray box testing, if you will, where maybe you know a little bit about the code, but you don't necessarily know exactly what's going on within the code behind it. So more of maybe an integration testing type thing. Unit tests are also useful for that. And it's possible to do testing of HTTP responses within the unit test framework, but to me, why bother? I mean, I'm going to go with the coded UI test and probably even the web performance test over trying to do that with the unit type testing.